The Inquisition by Dr. Gustav. December 24th, Frost 24th, 79, Age of Color. The man stood atop of the man rooftops that lined the city of Vale. The snowstorm had truly begun to set in now, with strong winds and flurries of snow blowing against him and covering the streets below in a white powder. On top of that, the sun had already set for the day, making the air even colder, though the man didn't mind. He'd grown used to the cold many years before, and this winter wouldn't be any different from the last, with the exception of one thing. The Inquisition had finally gained a foothold in Vale, though a small one. Beacon wasn't quick to jump on the Inquisition train as Mistral had been, but at least they weren't immediately shut down like Atlas had done. Gone were the days when he would have to head out into the wilderness and fight grim after grim after grim. After grim. The action that had once excited him had grown repetitive and boring. But now, with the Inquisition, he would be hunting not Grimm, but other hunters and huntresses. For those who had forsaken their oath to protect mankind would soon face the Inquisition's wrath. The man adjusted his coat and peered down into the streets, and ran his fingers across the new engraving on his belt, a wary eye, the symbol of the Inquisition. This newest mission was an odd one, if that were even the word for it. This traitor to mankind was only a first-year student, and even more curious was that he was still enrolled in Beacon. The files he looked up on him from the Beacon database didn't make him seem all too threatening, or able to even much harm to normal people. But appearances could be deceiving. Nonetheless, the man, the prideful hunter he was, chose to forego his usual armor and wore only his civilian winter clothing, save for his weapon holster on his back. Instead of a bulky sheath, he chose to go with a magnetic locking mechanism for his greatsword, which he held in his hand in anticipation. It was only a matter of time before the boy wandered by. Don't worry about the magnetic locking thing. I hear myself talking, so someone needs to turn their microphone off. You can do that by clicking on the microphone button in the top right and clicking and use push to talk, and then push some button on your keyboard that you will never push again. It could be Worst Ravenbane, Rush, Martian, Kellen, or Hart. In the interest of making the recording better, I am going to mute all sounds from all of you, so suck it. Zwei, not the dog, walked alone down the road. His mask clung coldly and uncomfortably to his face. He was visibly uncomfortable as his blade swayed side to side on his hip. His shoulders were raised to cover his neck, and his hands were deep into his jean pockets, hoping to conserve some of his body heat. Zwei quietly cursed himself for not wearing something warmer as he adjusted his grip on the bag filled with ammunition and dust, which was quite small due to Zwei's lack of sustained income. The lone boy hummed a cheery tune to himself as he advanced, turning his head to the sky and inhaling a fresh breath of air which cooled his lungs. There he was. The man, no, not even. The boy who had gone rogue. Just casually walking down the street. The man thought he must not know the Inquisition had finally rested their hand on Vale, to be so casual out in the open like this. It made him sick. He pushed up his coat's hood over his head. He would put an end to this. In a quick movement, he launched himself off the roof and down 2 meters away from the boy, causing the snow to shoot up around him. villain, he said lowly, as the snow began to drift back down, barely shrouding his facial features. You will tarnish the name of Hunter no more. He lifted up his large sword and stabbed it into the ground, resting his right hand on the pommel. For too long, you have brought the righteous name lower and lower with your crimes against mankind. He lifted his left hand and opened his palm towards Zwei, not the dog. Today is the day you die, Zwei Carter, not the dog. His hand began to glow a bright blue with his aura, and before Zwei knew what was going on, he was lifted into the air. I am Graviton, and I will end you! The man yelled before swinging his hand to the side and sending Zwei crashing toward a brick wall. In the moment before Zwei's body slammed into said wall, he must have wondered why, given the ample time during the stranger's monologue he hadn't moved. That was a question for another time, however. Meanwhile, the strange man pondered on a better name for himself. I'm sorry I cannot do voices better. It's very difficult to even say regular words. It was honestly too cold to be wearing the Anubis suit. It was honestly too cold to be wearing the Anubis suit! And wearing his hoodie like Omicron suggested did not help. The plating frosted over constantly, and if it weren't for the suit's heating, Juno would be covered in a thin layer of ice as well. But when your only available pair of warmish pants is attached to a power suit, and one of your teammates needs you to meet them in town, what are you going to do? Go outside without pants? In this weather? He shouldn't have gone out at all. His disgruntled trudging down the street ceased, however, when a strange and warmly dressed man fell from the rooftops onto the middle of the street, monologuing at a masked boy standing not too far from him. Before Juno could comprehend much of what the absolute fuck was going on, the man had somehow thrown the masked boy into a brick wall with a wave of his hand. Most people would scatter the second that seemingly unprovoked violence like this took place. Juno was not most people. Firing a grappling dart at the wall that the boy had been launched into and pulling himself towards the victim wasn't the greatest move he could have made, but the assailant seemed distracted enough for him to get away with it. However, it took one look at the mask for Juno to recognize the victim, the same kid who ran full tilt into his car and supposedly attended Beacon. God damn it, dude, what did you do? He muttered in disdain before turning to face the assailant, removing one of the hilts from his back and hitting the trigger, prompting it to unfold into its normal broadsword shape. Whatever was about to happen next, Juno was sure he'd need it. Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? Juno called out to the stranger, pointing the blade at him with an accusatory finger. Like an accusatory finger. I ran out of water. I am an Inquisitor, the man said, pulling his sword out of the snow-covered ground. Now the snow had settled. It was easy to see the sheet size of the thing. The blade itself was nearly 6 feet long and almost 2 feet wide at the base. It had what looked like angle wings engraved at the base of the blade along the intricate designs running all the way up taut-he tip of the sword. But calling it a sword didn't do it credit. It was more of a hulking mass of raw metal than a weapon made to cut down enemies. Despite its obvious weight, the man lifted it up with great ease, as if it were made out of paper. If you stand in my way, you stand in the way of justice! He planted his foot and turned the massive weapon to its side so that the flat of the blade was facing forward, in the way of honor. His whole body began to glow a bright blue. And in the way of hunters and huntresses everywhere, I will not allow you to aid this scum, but you are not my target. Suddenly, the man launched forward, and in an instant he was mere feet away from Juno. I will not make it fatal, he said quietly before he swung the flat of his blade towards Juno's side. Jumping off of a nearby building, Alexia said, I have been following you for the past hour, and now I see why. Drawing her sword, she says, explain quickly so I know why I can beat you up. It's just raining people in Vale, isn't it? The teen dryly remarked as another person leapt at him, sword drawn. Blocking the larger blade with the broadsword he had already deployed, Juno drew his second, intercepting the newcomer. Hey, I just got here. This big guy was beating up a kid I knew, and I'm not going to stand by and watch. He stated, briefly holding his two attackers at bay before sidestepping the massive slab of iron that the Inquisitor called a sword. Seeing as he wouldn't be able to hold off two attackers coming at him from either side, Juno moved back, forming the third point in a soon-to-be obscenely violent triangle of people. Alexia, back off! Lance's voice rang out loud and harsh against the winter air as he came into view behind his teammate, his eyes never leaving the Inquisitor as he spoke in an even tone to her. Let's play this smart and listen before we take sides. Prying himself from the Inquisitor as he spoke to those gathered. Everybody lower your weapons and I will try to parse this situation. Oh, and someone see if the victim is still breathing. Jet observed silently from the rooftops above. He watched from the rooftops as white powdery snow covered his gray wolf armor. It was way too cold for his regular casual outfit, so he decided he needed something warmer. Keeping his hand on Odin's sorrow, he looked at the group, carefully analyzing them. He didn't want to reveal himself yet, as he was very curious as to who that man was. The man with the giant blade. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't a student at Beacon. In fact, he didn't look like a student at all. Looking at the student who was calling for everyone to stand down, he thought to himself, of all the things to say, that's the first thing you think of? Miserably cold, incredibly hungry, and obscenely bored, Janus Rogo had intended to spend his night hunting down some cheap, hot food. He'd left his apartment wrapped in the warmest clothes he had, carrying his knuckles underneath it. There was ever trouble underfoot. He kept an ear and an eye out for those complications, as usual, and found himself witnessing something truly entertaining. A rabble of brawlers in one of the city's many back alleys. A couple of observers. One kid trying to yell about a truce. In the middle of it all, waving a ludicrous hunk of metal around, was a grown man. The fight was going in his favor. At least one of the students had it right. Observe. Quiet. Noise of this fight shouldn't carry far, not with the storm rolling in. Kind of shocking that there were so many people here as it is. Rogo shrugged, then took a seat on a nearby trash can, silently watching the events unfold, hunger forgotten for now. The Inquisitor turned to face the two newcomers, seemingly ignoring Juno. For your information, girl, I was aware of you the whole time. No mere child can sneak up on an Inquisition member, he says, pounding his fist into his chest triumphantly. And you two will not interfere. This is official Inquisition business. He didn't understand while these children were interfering with his job. He didn't understand while these children were interfering with his job. They don't know... Don't they know this kid is a known murderer? They must. Perhaps they were accomplices. If only he had the authority to make that call and end all of them right now. Someday, perhaps, but today was not that day. If you refuse to stay out of my way, then I have no choice but to incapacitate you. As he said this, his free hand began to glow blue again, and soon enough, Juno began to glow similarly. Within the moment, the boy began to float into the air, and he found himself being flung towards Alexis and Lance's direction, leaving none of them any time to react. Brief recession while somebody mutes their fucking microphone. And I get more water. Okay. I realize I should probably have background music for this. Maybe I'll put it on the recording. When last we left our heroes, the Inquisitor just yelled some things about incapacitation, and then attacked 3 people with magic and typos. Okay, either this guy was a fucking moron, or the kid Juno hit with his car once was way more dangerous than he appeared, or acted. No time to think on that though, because Juno soon found his armored ass being thrown at the newcomers. Taking a minute to wrap his head around what just happened, Juno got back to his feet, doing his best to ignore his now aching back. Dude, I hit that kid with my car once, he's harmless. Juno responded, taking a position optimal for countering or dodging melee strikes. Why don't you just back off? Inwardly cursing at the surprise attack, Lance had just enough time to shove Alexis out of the way before being hit full-on by the attack, sending him skipping across the ground like a stone on a lake, only coming to a halt by a pile of trash and the wall of cement behind it. It was clear Lance would be out of the fight for a bit by the sounds he was making. That's what it sounded like, by the way. Personal rendition. Inquisition? What's this man going on about? Jet thought to himself as he saw the man's hand glow along with the boy in the armor. After he was thrown, Jet was certain what he would do, but he continued to observe, waiting for the right moment to strike. Why would a Beacon student be targeted by an Inquisition? And if that really is true, why would this be the first we heard about it? Janice was suddenly quite aware of what was happening. Well, mostly. The events, at least. The logic behind it was all pretty well beyond him. It was certainly immensely amusing to a point for him. All it had taken was one word and his regular stealing of local newspapers. Now it was just a matter of making sure a bunch of students didn't get themselves killed through their own insanity. Rogo slipped his hands into his revolver stakes beneath his coat, chuckling as one student flew into the others. The Inquisitor snorts as he looks up upon his opponents. I have fought people and monsters twice your size and twice your numbers. You villains are nothing to me. He grinned as the snow began to fall harder. But I'll tell you what, since you kids seem to have a grip on the situation, he lifted his weapon and slammed it down into the ground once more, embedding it into the concrete, all 500 pounds of it. And since fighting is my forte, he said as he cracked his knuckles, I'll let you make a point before I pummel the both of you. A triumphant grin spread across his face, imagining the look of his co-workers' faces when he brought in so many criminal scums. I thought that was going to say criminal puns. Standing up after having been saved by her teammate. That was the end of the sentence. Alexia's aura shimmered as she activated all parts of her semblance. This is gonna hurt, mate. Breathing out to obscure the area around Alexia, runs over to the fallen Zwei and grabs him. Racing away from the fight, she jumps and with the help of her gliding wings begins to hurry off. Oh god, new people. Thurn was peacefully walking down the streets of Memory Lane on an actual lane. He visualized his moments with the previous team members back when he was still a student in Beacon. But something caught him off. The sound of fighting. Good thing I had gone fishing, he thought, as he took the fishing rod, Kingfisher, off his back. Good thing I had gone fishing, he thought, as he took the fishing rod, Kingfisher, of his back. He saw the snow falling more heavily. It would freeze his line should he use his usual tripwire tactic. He was also thankful for forgetting bait and taking along his good old ammunition belt. He pondered on how he mixed the two up when he saw Alexia run past him. Are you supposed to be my knight in shining armor? The young boy chuckled to himself, apparently not realizing the depth of the situation. Either he had been patiently sitting against the wall, or he had only just regained consciousness now. He quietly cursed under his breath that there hadn't been a single cut coming from the attack. Maybe that he would be able to dull the strong pounding in his head due to the harsh impact. Due to the boy's wonderful ability to prioritize what was important and what wasn't, he quickly realized his expensive bag of ammunition and dust was no longer with him, and was instead beside where he was standing originally, before being slammed into a wall. Never really fancied myself as a damsel in distress. Oh, this is him talking, he's just not using quotes. Shit. Alright, hold on. Never really fancied myself a damsel in distress. Mind if we grab my bag? Then you can whisk little old me to wherever you like. He asked Alexia. Either Zwei painfully didn't understand the gravity of the situation, or he really wanted his bag. My teammate will bring it. Right now, we're getting you out of this place. Looking over her shoulder, Alexia makes her way towards Beacon, hoping the others will keep the madman away. While walking down the street, hood up and gadget in his hand, Artorias bumped into Zwei and Alexia, dropping the gadget on the cement and causing it to break. Watch where you're going. I hope you know what you broke 3 full weeks down the drain. That was a gift from my parents back in Atlas. He said as he bent down to pick up the broke gadget and faced Zwei. Dear Lord, every single one of those puns hurt. But hey, at least this guy cleared up something very important. He was fighting a dumbass. An absurdly powerful dumbass. Oh joy. At least one of the people involved managed to get Zwei out of there. But now he was alone with the dumbass, and he was outmatched by a dumbass. This was going to be quite the story if he made it out alive. Taking a second to collect himself, Juno fired one of his grappling darts at the sword planted in the ground, using it as an anchor point to slingshot himself towards the Inquisitor for a desperate punch to the face. Rest in pepperoni. Austin was watching the entire fight from a slight distance away, and he already has most of the situation understood in his head. After all, it's quite hard not to understand the situation after hearing the man shouting out everything. He sighs to himself as he drinks a cup of coffee and as he continues to watch the situation play out. The moment someone started to escape with what he assumed was Zwei, he decided to act. Austin quickly speeds over, putting on a mask into their path with a cup of coffee still in hand. Once he arrives, there seemed to be another student that bumped into them. He can only hope that the student stands by his side. I'm afraid your path ends here. He took another sip of coffee before continuing on. If that man is who he said he is, then I'm afraid I must side with the Inquisitor. He sighs, thinking to himself, if only people had actually paid attention to Beacon's announcements. Austin quickly draws Dawnbreaker behind his back in case of a fight, and as he continues to seemingly drink coffee with a mask on. I want to think that Zwei is innocent, but I cannot take risks here, unfortunately. Austin continues to stand in their path with coffee in hand as he waits to intercept any possible escapes. That guy likes coffee. In one quick motion, the Inquisitor lifted his sword out of the ground and up into the air, jolting Juno upwards along with it. Once the boy reached the peak of his swing, the man slammed the weapon into the ground, shattering the concrete and bringing Juno down along with it. You will not interfere, boy, he said before turning his eyes to the direction Alexis had fled with his target. And you will not escape, villain! The Inquisitor yelled at the top of his lungs as he ripped his weapon out of the ground and launched himself into the air in pursuit of the delinquent who had stolen the murderer. If you think you can run from me, he yelled, perching himself up onto a rooftop for a better view of the streets. You are about to enter a new world of hurt! There they were. The boy had woken up and they were now both talking to a new kid. Another accomplice? He couldn't tell. Not yet. What he did know, however, was that the girl was helping a known fugitive. And he couldn't allow such heinous acts to continue. He stuck out his hand, and not long after, a blue glow surrounded Alexis. Before she knew what was what, she was flung into the air, and then back down into the ground, and then back up into and then sideways into her very own brick wall. Soon after, he launched himself downward towards Zwei, landing several feet away. "Your days of villainy are over, scum!" He lifted the hulking mass of metal into the air above them. "It's a lovely night out tonight." His eyes seemed to glint with something that could be called either malice or triumph. "Everyone's tucked in bed. The snow is drifting down." He gripped the hilt of his weapon tighter. "On days like these, villains like you should be burning in hell!" The yell that came out of the Inquisitor's mouth could only be described as primal, as he swung his weapon down towards Zwei with the force of a tank. Zwei was rather groggy still after being carried, knocked over and then being shouted at. He had to wonder what he had done to cause such a fuss. Maybe he had forgotten to flush after using a public toilet? He mentally shrugged as the Inquisitor began his attack. A loud, obscene line of curse words erupted from behind the boy's mask as he rolled to the side, almost flinging himself away from the attack. As he rolled, the boy's weapons were perfectly visible, a set of handguns and a blade, but instead of counterattacking, he continued to roll away until he was several feet away. And before he launched himself back at the Inquisitor, fist extended, aiming directly for the man's kneecap. It all made so much sense now. Zwei had never heard of anything called an Inquisitor, and why else would he be attacked randomly while carrying his ammo and dust home? "You're a really shitty mugger," he taunted. Lance was between the Inquisitor and Zwei in an instant, eyes burning with hatred, as he swung the axe form of obsidian... of his axe, named Obsidian something, into the sword which had, with as much aura as he could manage to deflect it, while simultaneously stabbing at the man's chest with Sugilite Maxim damage. While simultaneously stabbing at the man's chest with Sugilite Maxim damage, he didn't matter. I see. With Sugilite Maxim, damage didn't matter, he just needed to probe for weaknesses. Right now, that's all he could do. This man was far beyond any other hunter Lance had encountered thus far. Maybe a teacher could handle him, but even that seemed improbable. Artorius watched as the person jumped from the rooftops. "Whoa, what's going on here? I didn't mean to get involved in whatever this was. Look, just keep the scraps, I'll make another," he said as he started to walk away, but turned around just in time to see another person between the boy and the cloaked person. "Okay, what's going on here?" Well, that was a mistake. Though, to be honest, Juno's approach was just asking for retaliation. But he wasn't just about to lie there and let this guy kill Zwei. He knew that the kid couldn't dodge forever. "Zwei, cut and run!" The teen shouted before sheathing one of his blades, firing another dart at the ground near the Inquisitor's feet, pulling himself between the hulking man and the frail boy. Once he was in range, Juno deployed his shield, quickly made a pass at the man's... Oh, is it Zwei? Sorry. I don't know these things. Once he was in range, Juno deployed his shield, quickly made a pass at the large man's legs, slashing at the knee before bracing for retaliation. While Lance's distraction was certainly helpful, it certainly wouldn't hold the man at bay. The group would have to strike in conjunction with each other if this guy was going to be brought down, and even then, there were no certainties. Oh no. Jet watched the confrontation, seeing that the two students were clearly outmatched and the wounded one was just there. He had been charging up Zandasuken. Whilst watching for a solid 2 minutes. This should be enough to do some damage, he thought to himself as he readied himself for an attack. Seeing Lance block the Inquisitor's attack and Juno attack his leg, he decided that this was the best opportunity. Santasuken! Jet spoke the word... Oh, quietly, I'm sorry. Jet spoke the... Santasuken! Santasuken. Jet spoke the word quietly as he made one quick slice from the rooftop. Odin's sorrow vibrated and rang after it stopped moving, for the strike was true. His semblance attack split the nearby light post horizontally, and the Inquisitor would have taken quite a bit of damage, though Jet was unable to see whether the man was wearing armor behind him. Even if he was, he'd have had to be wearing nothing short of titanium for his armor not to break, and his cloak would be ruined. The concrete had a massive line formed in it due to the slash. He was careful not to hit Juno and Lance. Was ironically protected by the Inquisitor. He sheathed Odin's sorrow once more, jumping to the ground and dusted off the snow from his shoulders. Of all the horrible excuses of men I have encountered, you are by far the worst, he said, unimpressed by his actions thus far. Who exactly are you, and what business do you have here? He asked, wanting more information before attacking. He took his readied blade stance, just in case. Austin simply watched as the four simply attacked in the Inquisitor's direction. If that man is truly an Inquisitor, Austin shook his head and sighed as he was about to watch pure and utter humiliation. He bows his head in respect for the four fools, for they do not know what is about to happen to them. I feel bad for them, sort of. At least I get to see an Inquisitor's power. Page 3. People are posting while I read. It's getting longer. And in the next moment, the man was gone, replaced by a dusting of snow that shot up when he apparently launched himself upward, dodging each of the attacks. Down on the ground, things didn't exactly go to plan, with the man gone and Lance jumping in front of his way. I'm sorry. What was it again? Zawai crashed into Lance's back, who in turn was crashed into Juno coming from the other direction, all culminating in a pile of what could only be described as angry, confused teenagers. Mugger, he said quietly as he continued to move upward. Mugger! Oh no, he's angry. Like, really angry. You are nothing but insects beneath my heel! Screaming isn't even an appropriate word for what he was doing. It had transcended screaming itself. You are nothing but murders! But you are nothing but murderers and villains! Murders and villains! The jump had reached its peak now, and he was starting to fall back down, sword pointed downward as if he were going to dive bomb the pile of kids. I've been going easy on you! His entire body began to glow blue as he shot downward faster and faster. I see now! I should not toy with my food! And with that, he hit the ground. His sword penetrated a piece of exposed ground between all three of the kids, shattering the ground and sending the three of them flying up into the air. In another instant, each of them began to glow blue and froze mid-air. He turned to look toward the newcomer, and the one who had tried to attack him from the rooftop. His hand extended upward toward the three kids floating above him. Funny that you thought you could hit me there, villain. But you were just not sharp enough. He flung his hand toward the boy, sending all three students shooting toward him at unprecedented speeds. Sending all three students shooting toward him at unprecedented speeds. Not nearly enough edge! That pause was for coughing, drinking water, laughing, and more water. That's it. That is it. Enough of this. I'm calling in some help, Artorias said as he entered his locker number onto his scroll. A couple seconds later, his locker crashed down and he pulled out his footlocker from within the locker. Inception. Time for the abyss to spread. He shouted that. He shouted it as he opened it up, and a couple Abyss C drones flew out of the locker and started to fire rockets at the Inquisitor. Son of a bitch. Those 4 words were all that went on in his mind, over and over. As he was lifted off of the ground. That, and the thought that he shouldn't have just waited for the dryer to finish up. That he should have just waited for the dryer to finish up. Then he wouldn't be involved. He wouldn't be getting his ass kicked by a ridiculously powerful imbecile. But he wasn't stopping until he got one good hit in. One good, solid crack at this punk's jaw. Then he could be thrown around like a ragdoll. Firing 2 grappling darts at the ground while holding the line taut, Juno held on for dear life as one force pushed him towards the rooftops whilst remaining tethered to the ground. It was an odd feeling, really. Kind of like riding on a roller coaster while someone tried to rip your arms off. Nevertheless, Juno held strong, silently praying that he would walk away from this with both arms intact. Looking at the Inquisitor, who was in the air and ranting, Jet was dead certain about one thing. This man was insane, and that's an insult to insane people. He started to doubt whether this man was a power-hungry maniac or just an idiot. Either way, he did not expect what was about to happen. With the people he was trying to help in a pile, and the Inquisitor crashing down at them, he watched as the kids flew up into the air and stopped. He readied himself to evade. Having watched his opponent fight, he could predict what he would do. This guy has been using his semblance all this time. He must be running low on aura. I can't tell whether he's reckless or just stupid. He thought as the man spoke, unamused by his pun, but surprised by the volley of kids. Jet quickly dashed forward, using the building behind him for a boost. He quickly drew his sword, aiming it for the man's neck with an upward slash from the sheath. Thurn saw the students flying towards Alexia. With a quick movement, caught all three in his line. With an angry look, stared towards the attacker. You there, sir, are attacking innocent children. I may be retired from hunting, but I still know my code of conduct. Thurn calmly said, but his tone showed that he was furious. You shall stop these attacks before I do something to you. Spoiler. Permission. Click to show/hide. 1:48 p.m. Not surprised. Gus. May I have permission to tackle the edge? 1:49 p.m. Dr. Gustav. You have permission. Austin watched as the Inquisitor... Austin watched as the Inquisitor throw around the four like they were nothing. Yes. Only to find that the student that bumped into Zoai seemed to have summoned robots to do his bidding. He would have been more odd if he didn't decide to draw his attention back to the battle. Find that the guy called Edgy by the Inquisitor seems to have dodged the three thrown at him. The edgy guy dashed into melee range of the Inquisitor with a slash aiming towards the neck. Being the very helpful person that he is, Austin quickly jumped forward and tackled the guy away from the Inquisitor, flying quite away from the Inquisitor and landing on the guy's body. Austin starts shaking the guy back and forth in hopes of disorienting him. He took his time to notice that the guy was a Beacon student and probably much older. He can only hope that this will work. This was a train wreck. Only good way to describe it. Like a car full of nuns slamming into a bus full of clowns at the speed of sound. Awful and horrifying at the same time. People kept coming. More students. An old guy. One of the students backed the Inquisitor. He seemed to understand what was happening, but his detachment from reality was painfully clear. The Inquisitor was interesting. Arrogant and insane, definitely. It wasn't hard to see how he'd gotten his position, though. Sheer, unadulterated power. Massive amounts of aura. Some kind of telekinetic symptoms. Hard to say. Not without watching more. He wasn't attempting to hide now. He was simply laughing at the spectacle. That was Janice, since that name was never mentioned. Out of character. Son of a damn it, Gus. As Jet pinned down the boy, he became angry. With the boy shaking him, he quickly grabbed his neck and squeezed hard, choking him with his free hand. Even though he was being shaken, he didn't let it get to him, focusing on the task at hand. He didn't want to just let the guy attack innocents. But did that mean he had to hurt an innocent? When it came to it, Jet was sure about his own motives, but unsure about the Inquisitors, and therefore must be stopped. He gripped the boy's neck harder, and then he gripped his own sword. The boy must have been younger than himself, definitely weaker. "What are you doing, fool? You want an innocent to die?" he shouted, gripping harder whilst he spoke. Austin grew angry himself. He couldn't really do anything as the boy as the boy he tackled started to choke him. He chokes out a few words. Fuck off. He's much stronger. Good guy. Austin starts to struggle to free himself in hopes of stopping him. Hearing the boy speak, Jet decided that he may have gone a bit too far, especially on who seemed to be a fellow student. He pushed himself up and the boy along with him before pushing him off and getting up slowly. He quickly threw a leather canteen at the boy, feeling bad for choking him too quickly. Speak quickly now, I want an explanation, he said sternly, not wanting to waste valuable time. Austin quickly grabs the leather canteen and dumps the water inside on his mask. Instantly, he magically feels better, but not enough to actually speak in proper words. Inquisition. Hunts rogue hunter. Target Zwei. Can't take risks. Austin coughs as he tried to gather his breath. Austin coughs as he tried to gather his breath once more as he watches out for the Inquisitor. End of part 1.